All right. So for those of you who are here, and before I dive in at 2:02, I'd love to invite you to just take a minute to go to gallery view to see all the other parents, whether or not they join the program, who are here because they have a PDA child or teen. Okay, so I'm looking at the gallery view and we can see 105 people on this call so far. And I hope this just lets you know that you're not alone and you're not crazy if you take away one thing from this call. All right, welcome to those of you who have joined. All right, I see some of your faces. I love seeing faces. All right, it is 2:02. I'm Casey. I am the founder of At Peace Parents, and today we're going to spend 90 minutes to 2 hours together, potentially a little bit more because I did get a lot of questions. We're going to record this and send you a link to the replay. So if you need to jump off after 30 minutes, an hour, not a problem at all. So as participants, we're going to keep everyone on mute and the chat will be disabled so that we can get through the content. However, in the actual program, the parents do have a chance to come off mute when they're being spot coached, and the chat will be enabled so that you guys can connect with one another. So I will be answering questions at the end of this presentation that were submitted through the link. And if you guys have any questions after this call that aren't answered by this call or in the frequently asked questions, you can always email us at journey@peaceparents.com and one of our team members will support you in getting your question answered. Okay, so before we dive into the content, I want to introduce you to 3 members of the team that will be supporting those cohort participants and helping to moderate in our online community and also sharing their expertise. So the first person I want to introduce is my husband, Jake. Where is
Hey
he?
folks, I'm here. I'm Casey's husband. And yeah, it's great to see your faces, to have you all here today. I play a couple roles in the program and with the business. So I think primarily some of you I've probably already interacted with over email, specifically if you're working with like a third party funder, NDIS, any of the sort of local governments that help pay for the program, you might have interacted with me. I oversee the team that does all of our customer service, and we always try to be as responsive and helpful as we can. And then within the program, I do a few sessions, and I also moderate one of the community conversation threads in our online community. And all of those are around non-lead parenting. So not being the sort of lead parent of your kid with PDA. Often those non-lead parents are dads, but not always. And really, even when I host the sessions, like even lead parents often join us. All are welcome. So if you end up in the program and I get to work with you there, I look forward to it. It would be great. Thank you.
Yes, and I will do a caveat just for full transparency. My husband threw out his back and took a muscle relaxant, so he's a little bit low energy. But he is there to support the non-lead parents and the dads in the program, and also in charge of customer service. So you will interact with him if you guys are in the cohort. And hubby, could you please turn your mic off? Thank you. Okay. All right. So our next team member is Donna Georgian. I'm just going to say a bit about her. Donna has been working with At Peace Parents both as a coach and in the program for, I think, a year and a half. She has supported parents through multiple cohorts. Her area of expertise is PDA tweens, teens, and young adults. She has raised 2 PDA adults, a 20-year-old and a 26-year-old, and from my perspective, embodies a lot of the radical acceptance and problem solving that we're going to do in this program. And she's a huge asset. She'll be hosting a live call for the teens, tweens, and young adult parents, should you decide to join. And she will be moderating a specific circle within the online community for that group of parents who are facing hormonal issues, balancing um, independence of teen years with the PDA profile, etc. So without further ado, I will just let Donna introduce herself.
Thank you, Casey. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It is so good to see so many people. And as Casey shared, I've raised two PDAers. I didn't know about PDA, nor had I heard about it until my girls were one was 18 going on 19, and the other was in her teen years as well. That's a long time not knowing what's going on, right? Anybody out there have tweens and teen? Yes, yes, you know what I'm talking about. To say that it was torturous, I don't think that that's really an over exaggeration. And so when after dozens and dozens of medications, trying every parenting approach, seeking out specialists, medical, psychological, behavioral, ABA, all these different aspects. And it not only did not get better, but got worse, exponentially worse. I was in dire straits in my life and with my girls. When I first learned about PDA, it was that light bulb moment, right? We were all like, oh my gosh, this must be it. And as I began applying PDA understandings to my girls, all those things, all those years that didn't work, suddenly the PDA approach was shifting. And my personal story is, it was transformational. It absolutely changed our world. And then I discovered Casey, and she was talking about the theory of change, where the root cause is more than just anxiety. We're looking at a nervous system disability. And what I loved about that is it took it from well, let's just do low demand parenting to let's really understand what's happening inside our kids. And that opens up so many other options to us as parents. And so as you're going through, if you choose to engage and go ahead and enroll in the Paradigm Shift program, the program itself, first and foremost, you're connected to so many other parents who you'll hear a story and go, that's me. They're in my home. I know they are. And the other aspect to it is just learning. You're learning tools, you're learning skills and practicing them, experimenting, asking questions, and finding what works for your family, because not just one approach, not just one path is going to be perfect for everybody. And that's what I personally love. So thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing those of you who decide to join in the future. And thanks for taking the time today. So thank you, Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. All right. And last but not least is Kendall, who is also a coach with At Peace Parents and is a Paradigm Shift Program alum, and began also working in the program to support parents. She is a PDA autistic and gifted adult who specializes in 2E expressions, or the twice exceptional expression, so gifted and PDA, as well as larger family dynamics. She has 4 children who are PDA and gifted under the age of 10, which is a lot. And she also will be supporting parents, all of us will, but has the lived experience of moving through new identity formation with, like, oh, maybe all of this information we're learning in a nuanced way actually applies to me as well. Maybe I'm undiagnosed PDA, or maybe I'm autistic, etc. So we often have about a third of our participants, either the parent or the co-parent, the partner, realizing their own neurodivergence. So she is our identity doula in in the moderated community, and will also be giving us a live session about her own experience as an internalized PDAer. So another beautiful member of our team, and I would love for her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Casey. Yeah, it's wonderful to see all of you on here. I have you on gallery view right now, so I can see your beautiful faces and names. I know many of you I have interacted with a little bit over email as you've signed up for the wait list, and I just feel really grateful already to I don't know to see all of you. It's I One of the things about this program that I really love is the sense of community that we get, because I feel like so often as parents of PDAers, we feel shut out of community. And we're surrounded by people we love and who love us and have just no understanding of what we go through on a daily basis. And one of my favorite parts of moderating the community is, watching people connect over shared stories, and shared difficulties and shared solutions and creative ideas that like make sense to us because it comes from a place that's similar to what our own family is going through. Um, and yeah, so like in addition to all the things Casey said, I do specialize in the 2E profile, and can help anybody whose kids are gifted, and just generally as we move through the frameworks that Casey is teaching. Anywhere that anybody's feeling stuck in any of the modules, like I am there to hold your hand. I am there to point you to resources. I am there to connect you with each other. And this will be, I think, my fourth cohort that I have moderated. So fifth total that I participated in because I am a PSP alum. Um, and every time I am just like blown away by the parents themselves. I think that's also one of my favorite parts about this whole process is like because our lived experience is so different from like most people, when we go to professionals, we're told that we're wrong when really a lot of the times our intuition is right, and being able to get together and like come back to our inner wisdom and have it validated and actually see progress when we listen to it is just it's transformational. So anyway, I'm excited to see all of you here. For whoever joins the program, I'll be so excited to work with you. And thank you for giving up some of your precious time to be here with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with the content. I am going to move at a somewhat fast clip just because I don't want to waste any of your time. And there's a lot to get through because I want to make sure that you have all the information you need to make an informed decision that feels aligned and good when enrollment opens on Monday. Okay, so what are we going to do together today? We're going to do 7 things. I'm going to talk to you about what the goal of the program is and how we measure success. Like, how do we know if the program is actually working for parents and their children? We're going to talk about how we achieve that success, what the program is at its core and what it is not, the logistics and details of the program components, which is like, what do you actually get when you scan your credit card, like what arrives. Um, and then the methodology that we use, which is called the 5A framework that I'll go through. And within each module, I'll just list what the skills are that we'll be practicing and working on. One of those skills I will illustrate. It's called cost benefit decision making. So I'll go through an anecdote from previous cohorts so you can see what the skill is or the tool to develop the skill. And then we will end with a Q&A. I selected almost 50 questions. I'm not going to be able to answer every single question, but I will try to get through as many as possible. And we'll stay on with whoever's still on with me to get through those that I have listed. So you can also drop off. I know that you have things to do and watch the replay for the Q&A. Okay, so before I dive into those 7 things, I just want to start with a story, which is almost exactly 5 years ago on Father's Day 2019. And at the time I was living in DC, and I found myself in a yoga studio nearby in a class, just completely weeping and like tears streaming down my face while I was doing the poses, and I couldn't stop them. And I'm not a big crier. I'm pretty even keeled when it comes to processing emotions. And I remember feeling all this guilt because it was Father's Day. And since my PDA son had been born, the only thing either of us ever wanted for a Mother's Day or a Father's Day was to not be with our child because it was so challenging. But we didn't know why, right? He needed constant supervision. He seemed very defiant. He seemed like two different kids in two different locations, like when he was at childcare versus at home. And he needed constant undivided attention, or he would start to get hurt, break things, or escalate into agitation. And my husband and I didn't understand that or know why it was happening. He was our first child. So I came home from, well, I was in the yoga class, and the reason I was crying was because things had escalated in my home. And my son was 4.5, and he had sort of turned into what felt like an accurate way to say was that he was a feral animal. Okay, like the way he was behaving was no longer like defiant or sort of like avoidant. He was actually going into these what looked like feral animal states and meltdowns that were scary for everyone. Like he would, if I would get near him, he would hiss and growl and scratch and bite. And the way that his face looked was like he wasn't even there in these moments. And I couldn't soothe him. And these moments came unexpectedly, seemingly out of very small things, like, you know, him spilling something on the floor and me asking him to help me clean it up, trying to help him with independence, or buckling his seatbelt, or trying to walk him up the stairs to bedtime, or even me not intervening and him trying to like play with a toy, like trying to connect the train set and not being able to, and just ending in what looked like a feral meltdown. And sometimes he would run away out the front door. But I never thought to myself, he's autistic, because he was very outgoing, he was very social, he seemed to love daycare, etc. At the same time, he had increasingly stopped speaking. And so what I now understand as like selective mutism, it just looked like he was losing his ability to speak. And when I would speak to him, he would just growl at me or say, stop talking. And he had always been somewhat of a picky eater, but he had reduced his eating to no vegetables, no fruits, no protein, including like chocolate milk, and only a couple processed foods. And he was saying, my legs don't work, my legs hurt, and we were increasingly having to carry him places, between the car and the house, etc. And so I knew something was seriously wrong. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't understand what was going on. And every time I spoke to professionals, what they advised me and what I did was very much like, be more consistent, be stricter. I tried 1, 2, 3 magic. I tried positive discipline. I tried consequences, all the things. And without me knowing it, he had moved into nervous system burnout. But we were looking at him and we were like, did something happen at daycare? Was he abused at daycare? This is a trauma response. Like, where is this coming from? And we even talked to the daycare and we're trying to put our finger on it. And, inside I was terrified. And so I came home from yoga and I walked in the door, and back then I always had this sense of dread, whether I was coming home from work or coming home from the grocery store. It was like walking into the home felt like I don't want to be here because I don't know what's going to happen. And he's just going to scream for 2 hours. So I walked in. We also had a 7-month-old, my younger son, William, at the time. And I walked in after my yoga class and I said something to my husband. And I think I don't even remember what I said to Cooper, my PDA son, and he just went into one of these big feral meltdowns. And so I did what I had always done since my baby was born, which was like pick up the baby, run into the street, and have my husband make sure that Cooper didn't get hurt or destroy things or anything. And I remember standing on the street corner with my 7-month-old, again, just crying and just being like, what is happening to my life? Like, what is this? And I remember a neighbor drove by and rolled down her her car window and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay. Like something is happening with my son and I don't know what it is." So after about a half an hour, I walked back. Remember, this is Father's Day, so like not a good Father's Day. So I walk back. I see that my husband is like ashen and upset. And I was like, "What happened?" And Cooper had thrown a toy in my husband's face and hit him in the face. So he took it and was like, "I'm going to put this in the basement now as a consequence," right? And my PDA son, Cooper, locked my husband in the basement without a phone and no way to get out. And it took him like a half an hour to negotiate his way out. And so we called the pediatrician on the emergency, like after hours line. And they were like, "You might want to, we don't know what to do. You might want to take him to the psychiatric emergency room at Children's Hospital and have him admitted." And my husband and I, and me especially, had this aha moment. And I'm sure many of you have had something like this, or you wouldn't be here, which is like, nobody knows how to help me. Like, nobody knows what's going on with my son. And what I've tried has made things worse. And nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's going to care or figure this out but us, because nobody cares as much as we do about our own child. And so this aha moment led to the next 5 years, and it led to us leaving Washington, D.C., me leaving my career as a researcher, spending 2 years as a full-time caregiver, and then like slowly transitioning to doing some things on my own, like what has ended up as the business. But all of that pain and confusion and isolation and trial and error, and the woman who was on that corner feeling forsaken when her neighbor rolled down the window and asked if she was okay, like that is what makes me so passionate about being here with you and the work I do with parents. That's why I only work with parents of PDA children and teens. Um, it's why I'm here, because I'm always thinking about the counterfactual of, what if I had never known? What if I hadn't figured out these tools? What if I hadn't been able to get to where we are today? So my goal is to dramatically shorten a 5-year timeline like my own, or even a 2-year timeline, and to reduce the pain and trial and error and isolation and the feeling of being forsaken by welcoming you into this program. And if you don't join the program, I hope that you feel it on this call today. So the program, the Paradigm Shift program, is the culmination of my own lived experience and trial and error, as well as research into trauma, neurodiversity, PDA, and polyvagal theory. And importantly, and I think this is unique, and it's something that Donna and Kendall and I share, which is the bird's eye view that we have about the parent journey from working with now over 1,000 parents of PDA children and teens. So this is the 10th cohort of our signature program. And one more thing before we jump in, and I truly mean this. So I just want you to know that no matter where you're at, if you are the person on that street corner, if you have a teen who hasn't left their room for a year and swears at you every time you try and engage, I believe in you and I believe in your child. Like, I believe that they're good no matter how they're acting on the surface, and that the task becomes supporting them out of their survival brain and that threat response, so that who they are already can come out, their inner divine light. And I believe that's true for you and for them. And if you don't believe that right now, because I don't know if I would have believed that 5 years ago, that my kid was a good kid, part of our role here is to hold that belief for you as you make these changes. So again, even if you never buy anything on this call or from our business, I want you to know that we still believe in you and we believe in your child. And maybe that's why you're here today. Maybe that's the message you needed to hear. So don't despair. You will get through this. It's not always going to be like this. You're a good parent and your child is a good kid, no matter what other people around you say. Okay. How's everybody feeling? Good. Okay. Thumb up. Okay. All right. What is the goal of this program and how do we measure success? Like, how do we know if the program works? Okay. So there are 3 time horizons that I want to talk about and how we know if the program is successful. So the first time horizon is the 3 months we're together, the 3 intensive months that we spend in a live cohort. And there's 2 outcomes that the program is designed to facilitate. One is you, it's you and how you feel at the end of the program. How is your mental health? How's your anxiety? How's your depression? How is your self concept, your confidence, your feeling of empowerment? How are you sleeping at night? Healing some of that trauma that you've been through. And before I mention the child's part, I just want to say that 2 cohorts ago, an alumni who's a neuropsychologist at the University of Michigan Medical School actually did a pre-post study of parents who had been through the paradigm shift program. And it has not been published as peer review yet because it's in the process, but on 10 of 13 health-related quality of life measures for parents, there was a statistically significant improvement. So anxiety, depression, caregiving burden, sleep, confidence, and a few others. Okay, so this is as much about you as it is about your child. The second outcome is something we're going to be measuring as we're going through the program. And I'm going to teach you how to do this, but we're going to be measuring 3 things to indicate whether or not the PDA lens and this approach is actually helping your child, because we never want to double down on something that doesn't help, right? We've done enough of that as parents. So the 3 categories are, we're going to be measuring cumulative nervous system activation. So what's built up in your child or teen system and how it comes out in equalizing behavior, which is like the controlling, critical, manipulative, targeted behavior that's so distressing to witness, especially if it's directed at you or a sibling. Could be self-equalizing, like negative self-talk, self-harm, meltdowns, shutdowns, freeze, elopement, those types of nervous system indicators. We're going to be measuring that, and it should start to come down over time. That's indicating that their overall nervous system is coming down. Okay, so that's one thing we're going to measure. The second is felt safety and connection to you. So what this might look like for example, if you have a teen that hasn't left their bedroom in a long time, it might look like during these 3 months, the teen comes out and sits in the living room, maybe doesn't talk to you, but comes out and sits in the living room for 10 minutes while you're doing something else. That would be like an initial indicator of engagement because they haven't been coming out of their room. For a younger child, I'm going to give you an example from like 4 cohorts ago where a mom uploaded a video of her son holding her hand. He must have been like 8 or 9 while they were watching a show together. And it was the first time he had voluntarily made physical contact in 2 years, right? So that's the initial type of indicator we want to start seeing. Some of your children are probably more verbal, express more emotionally. Maybe they give lots of hugs. That doesn't mean they're not PDA. It just means that their indicators might be more like reflective of their inner experience, telling the parent more about like their experience in the body, or that the parent is doing a good job and finally understands them, or asking the parent like, can you teach my teacher how to be with me because she doesn't understand it. So those are indicators of connection. We're going to learn how to measure those. There's also access to basic needs. So this is a big one that we're going to be looking at. There's 5 categories: toileting, sleep, hygiene, safety, and eating. Okay, so the types of indicators that we're going to be looking at, like for example, with toileting, your child might have had a toileting regression where it appears that they were potty trained and then all of a sudden they're not, right? Or they're using diapers at 7 or 8 years old, or they need to poop only in a diaper, in a bathtub, a certain location outside. Or it might be less extreme, right? Where they're going to school every day and holding their pee and poop and won't poop or pee outside of the home anywhere. Maybe they have encopresis, getting UTIs. Maybe they need help wiping at an age that seems beyond developmentally appropriate. Okay, so these are the types of indicators we're going to be measuring improvement on toileting. For eating, it might be they're showing interest in new foods and maybe trying something new for the first time after a long time while they're in burnout, or you're starting to see things improve on their constant eating, right? So, or you have a child who hasn't bathed for 6 months, and by the end of the program, they're voluntarily bathing for the first time. Okay. So it's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be at the end of this program. You have a kid who's eating 2 processed foods and now they're eating filet mignon and like spinach. Okay. But we're going to be tracking indicators of your child's progress according to their nervous system. Okay. Because as nervous system accumulation occurs and children enter burnout or teens enter burnout, 2 things happen. The physiological impact of their nervous system going off all the time, like, for example, you know, if adrenaline's going and cortisol is going and the metabolism is speeding up and they have tunnel vision, like, it makes sense that they wouldn't be able to sleep, right? But they'd also the other dimension is control coalescing around the basic needs, because that's the one thing that, like, you truly can't control. Okay? So that's what we're going to be tracking and thinking about for the first 3 months and seeing as like, okay, this is the right approach for my kid, and this is how I know. Okay. The second time horizon would be a year out. Okay. So I always, when parents are participating in the program, I always ask them to email me a year from now to tell me updates. And it's one of my favorite things to receive these emails. So, what are the types of emails that I get? I can go out to dinner with my husband again, because now when I come back, my tween doesn't threaten suicide or do self-harm, right? Because there's that trade-off that you feel of like, well, maybe someone else can be with my child, but if I leave, what's the cost to their nervous system and what's going to result from that? An email about, here's a picture of my child with their eyebrows grown back in. The mom was looking at old photos from a year ago, and the child had self-equalized and plucked out all their eyebrows. And after a year of switching the parenting, the eyebrows grew back. So another example, this is in the basic needs category. The child gained 20% of their BMI back after it was dangerously low, and there was a hospitalization and the BMI was at 1%. Okay. Often these types of things are looked at as medical issues apart from PDA rather than there being a causal relationship. Or they're approached behaviorally, which can make a lot of this stuff worse if your child is PDA. Okay. I just received 2 emails, one about a child. The parents had done a spot coaching about should we send our kid to summer camp or not, right? And I don't give answers. I don't say you should do this or you should do that. I help them work through the tool, and then they made a decision based on their situation and where they were at 8 months out from the program to send their kid to summer camp. So they sent me an update about him thriving and having so much fun and the letters he was writing to them. So it's like a joy indicator of like, my kid is happy. The light is in their eyes again. We're peaceful and stable. It doesn't mean that the kid's not PDA. It means that they've found an equilibrium. Updates about thriving in a neurodiversity affirming school, saying I feel better in my body, unschooling and the relationship completely changing, violence going away. There was an update. No, I'm going to get to that a little bit later. And then there's the stuff that you don't see on the outside as much, which is how you feel as a parent after the program and after a year of practicing these foundational tools for yourself, which is healing childhood trauma. shifting the relationship with your parents, because often one or more parent was undiagnosed PDA or you were, right? And often there's a strained relationship. Maybe your partner and you are on the same page again. You've stepped into a new identity or direction. And then other updates like I started a nonprofit about neurodiversity or a school or a different career. And so those are all the types of things that can happen a year out once your family is stable and at peace. And those are the things that I want for you. And then finally, the 10, when I designed this program and the way that we teach this program and support you is really like the timelines are years/decades. Like what we're trying to give you is the foundation for the rest of your child's life. Okay. No matter what situation comes your way. So, how I want you to feel and the way we design this is that this was the best and last money you spent on PDA stuff, right? So my goal is to put myself out of business with this program, meaning I will teach you everything that I know and you will have the tools to practice yourself. Okay? So you're not going to feel, or my hope is that you don't feel like you can't answer your own questions, because we can never anticipate all the different things that could ever come up 10 years from now in your life. Okay. How do we achieve success? There are 4 things that this program is focused on giving you. One is clarity. This is clarity on your child's brain and nervous system, but also how to use the PDA lens to understand your child, which I'm going to talk about in the framework, and clarity, and we're going to help you with this, on where you're getting stuck, because that's one of our areas of expertise, which is like sometimes the question that a parent asks is like a question about the tools, but we can see the pattern of like, oh, this is a common place where parents get stuck in their journey, and here's why. Okay. So we want to give you clarity on that. A big part of this program, second, is skills. Okay, so we're going to have tools and the opportunity not just to learn about a skill, but to practice it, implement it, refine it, and become a master of it, right? So that at the end of the program or 6 months out, you feel competent at using these skills. And I'm going to outline what the skills are. So it will provide you with the structure that you need to experiment and the guidance and mentorship live from our coaches and from me. Okay? So there's action here. So it's not just a passive program. The third is radical acceptance. So this is a core feature of the program. We spend 3 weeks just on this topic, and the tool that goes along with it. And so at its root, this is about radically accepting the limitations and constraints of your life that are present in order to ultimately transcend those constraints or limits. Okay, so this, what does that mean? It means, and I'm including myself, many of us spend so much time and energy, years even, trying to find the fix for PDA without even necessarily realizing it. And so we're expending all of this energy trying to control something we can't control, rather than letting go and finding resourcefulness and agency within those constraints. And that's what we're going to be working on in this program. Then finally, supporting you to find your unique direction and path. Okay? It should look different than mine. It should look different than Kendall's. It should look different than Donna's, because this isn't a like another set of rules or a dogma of like, if you do this, then this happens, right? So you are going to be confronting triggers as you make decisions and confront this piece of radical acceptance, and we're here to support you through that. So this is a non-judgmental space in the sense that I approach everything from a position of objectivity and neutrality, meaning there is no right or wrong answer, right? So we are here to observe with curiosity, collect data, and then make our own decisions and experiment, which means there is no space for judging a parent who makes a different decision than you do, or that is in a different part of their journey than you are. So, what does this mean? Let's just take 4 topics: screens, school, siblings, therapy. Okay. There's a large group of parents who have gone through this program who have used the tool to make decisions to continue or to implement screen time limits. And then there is another group of parents who have decided to relax screen time limits. And those same parents at different points of their journey may use cost benefit decision making to make a different decision. The same is true for school. Some parents have kept their kids in school, some parents have changed schools, some parents have decided to homeschool or unschool. Siblings, some parents have had to separate siblings to a degree that can feel extreme. I'm just going to give you an example from a previous cohort where the 13-year-old boy was so violent, and it was an externalized PDA-er. They'd literally tried everything. He was an adopted child. And so they had gone through an attachment lens and a very different lens than the PDA lens. And the younger sister was an internalized PDA-er who was experiencing trauma. And so they made the decision to experiment with 2 different households for a period of time. Since gotten an update that that things have improved dramatically and that they're going on a family vacation. Okay. Other families cannot do 2 separate households for whatever reason, because of finances, because of logistics, because it's a single parent. So we find within those constraints a way to make sense of it, right? So maybe it's more about troubleshooting, what do we do with the sibling to keep them safe? How can we provide a situation where they're away and we're putting our bodies physically between a child and a sibling? ABA therapy. A subset of parents have found that certain ABA practitioners actually provide the dopamine novelty and co-regulation that supports their child. Other parents have PDA children who have been traumatized by ABA. So this is what I mean by I'm not going to be on the call and be like, I'm not going to be on the live sessions, and it's not going to be like, Casey, should I do ABA? And I'm like, no, you shouldn't, because blah, blah, blah. I'm going to come at it from a place of like normatively or like philosophically neutral. I'm here to facilitate your decision making and experimentation. Okay, so there's no advocacy agenda here. The only personal agenda that I have for you and your child is your well-being and finding peace over time. So let's say you decide to take this program and you go through the whole program and you experiment consistently, and you decide, you know what? Not for me. Not for me. I think actually a different approach is better. I will feel like, awesome, you got clarity. I'm so glad that you got clarity, and this is the direction you're going in, because that's what the program will have provided. That doesn't happen to the majority. I would say 99% of the people who go through this program, that doesn't happen to. They may gain clarity on like, oh, I think this part of their behavior really is PDA driven, but they still have some anxiety over here. So now that we have clarity, let's talk to a professional about anxiety and get medication and or therapy for that. Okay, so we're really honing in on this one particular aspect of your child's brain wiring, and we're going to be consistent, methodical, and structured about it so that you are confident in knowing what the root cause is. Okay. Okay. What this program is not. This program is not a magic bullet. Okay. I'm not going to solve all your problems. I'm not going to be able to fix everything. And actually, the truth is there's nothing magical about me. You're going to be the one who's finding the solutions, okay? So, as I said before, it's less about like me telling you what to do or us telling you what to do and what the right quote right thing is, or this is the fix, because often there isn't a fix and there isn't a solution. It's giving you the skills and tools to find agency within that context. And I'm going to be very honest with you during this program. This will trigger you if we go through some of these tools and I say, there's not a solution here. You have this option or this option. There's no option C. Let's find agency within constraints or radically accept that these are the two options. And over time, once you move through the grief of realizing, there isn't some magic bullet that Casey's been hiding from her Instagram and podcast that like, if I buy this program, she will give me that magic bullet, because I don't have one. Okay. I don't have a fix for things that I don't have control over. That doesn't mean that we can't make tremendous progress and experience transformation. It just means like I'm not hiding something for the program that I haven't shared on social media. What it is in the program is that you're moving through it to practice and implement with a trauma-informed group of people supporting you and a group of other parents who are doing it with you. Okay, it's also not an online support group. There are plenty of those. And this is a place for action, meaning that the online moderated community, if you think of like this as a college course, right? Where you have the autonomy to use what pieces are serving you. The moderated community online, which is in our web platform, it's not on Facebook, is more like a discussion section, right? So if you went to college and had a discussion section, it's not a place to like just dump all the trauma and emotional triggers that we're feeling, because we have a group of people, many of whom have experienced trauma, for whom that can lead to flooding, and it's not a space for judgment either. So this isn't to say you can't feel feelings, and of course people are going to be like, I'm trying out this tool, like I'm trying to do this nonviolent communication, and I'm getting shut down by my parents. Like they're just not respecting my boundaries. And of course you're going to feel frustration and annoyance, and you're going to put that in the community, and we're going to support you. But what I mean by emotional dumping is like, it's not a place just to come on and rant about how much your kid sucks and how much your life sucks, et cetera, because frankly, that already exists on Facebook. And like, you don't need to buy a program for that. Like, we hold tight boundaries. It's true moderation. We see everything that's posted. I go in twice a week to support families. There's someone every day making sure that we have a good vibe and are supportive of one another, not judgmental and not just dumping. Okay. So third, this is not a crisis intervention program. Okay. It is a large group program. And it's more, we will be supporting you, but this is how I want you to think of it. So parents ask like, will I have enough time to go through the program? And what I want you to think about instead of how much time it takes is like your energy and like, can you be in your thinking brain enough to do it? And if the answer is no, then probably don't purchase now. Okay. Because here's the thing. It is designed to be autonomous. Like if you want, you never have to come into the community or the live sessions. I have families who just go through all the pre-recorded materials over a year, and then they jump into the alumni community when they're ready. And that's awesome. Or you have parents who are like, I'll catch up with the pre-recorded materials. I'm just going to go to the lives. right? Or I'm just going to do the community, and it's all good. It's all good. However, I want you to be making that decision about how to move through the program from a place of not fear, but like, you know what? My kid's in burnout. I'm working part-time. The pre-recorded materials, I'm going to have to listen to on the podcast, and I might not make it to all the live sessions, but I'm definitely going to be participating in the community. And so you're making that decision from your frontal lobe rather than purchasing the program and being like, right? I mean, like, there's so much stuff, like, I don't know what to do. And of course, like, email us and we'll help you get logged in and we'll point you to the things. And it's not going to be like, hands off in that sense. I just don't want you to purchase it at a time when you feel like you truly can't use the program, right? Um, because you can go absolutely as slow as you want. Absolutely. And how you use it is up to you. And I'm going to talk about the universal design of the program itself. But I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. Am I ready to start making some difficult changes and confronting my fears and triggers about some of this stuff? If you're like, I cannot be triggered anymore, even if I'm held while I'm triggered, then wait, right? Or maybe go to a different program. Second, am I expecting Casey to give me a magic bullet and change things she can't, like the school system in my country or the fact that my child's PDA? Again, I can't change those things. I will deliver you all the compassion and lived experience of going through that triggering realization myself, but ultimately I can't fix what none of us can control. Okay, finally, I've mentioned this already. It's not a one size fits all. And so things will still be messy after the program. You will still be engaging in trial and error, but whatever comes up, even if we didn't discuss it in the course specifically, you will have the tools and skills and the lens to problem solve and take the next right step for your family. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause, check my time. We're doing good. How's everybody doing? Is this making sense? I see some nods. I see Jason giving me a thumbs up. I see Lauren giving me a nod. Linda, Sophia. I'm scared to say your name. Oveen O'Sullivan. Thumbs up. Kimberly, love it. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the logistics. So, Casey, what the heck is in the program? Like when you do your little credit card, what do you get? Well, let me tell you. Okay, so the bulk of what you receive is lifetime access to the materials. Okay, so what do you have lifetime access to? First, there are 85 short videos, about 10 to 15 minutes, that are structured into modules. And those can be viewed as videos, they can be read as transcripts, or they can be listened to on the private podcast. Okay. And so as soon as you purchase on August 5th, you will get to see all those videos and access them however you want. Okay, so many parents do spend part of that month before the live cohort, at least going through some of the materials so that they can ask questions. Okay, so everything is, to the extent we've been able to, universal design, meaning there's different ways to engage with the content depending on your brain. Okay, so if you want to watch the videos, awesome. If you want to read the transcripts, great. If you want to listen to it as a podcast, awesome. So both you and another caregiver family member will get access, your own access, so you can go at your own pace. So it could be you and your partner, it could be you and your caregiver, it could be you and a grandparent. The grandparents will have access to their own grandparent class, and therapists will have access to their therapist class. We'll give them logins and make sure they get access. But for the whole program, it's essentially 2 parents. It's okay if one of the parents is an ex-husband or wife. They can be in different households. The spirit is just like allowing each parent to process at their own pace, okay? Then we have a private podcast, which is currently over 240 episodes. Each episode is me with another parent, anonymized, answering a question from a previous cohort. So basically, you can search on any question, ranging from like, we have a cat. I think there's 2 episodes about this. We have a cat and my PDA child is abusing it. Do I get rid of the cat? And we walk through like the decision making, all the way to, I'm trying to communicate with my partner who I believe is undiagnosed PDA and is my ex. How do I approach this? Right? It's like all the things are in that private podcast. And what's cool is that as an alumni, not only will you have access to this, it keeps growing with each cohort. Okay, so you always get new materials. Then we have 40 plus PDFs, and we have an onboarding PDF and a PDF collated thing. But the PDFs, all the PDFs, you can share with your care team. What does that mean? Therapist, teacher, grandparents, babysitter. You can show them this stuff to help you communicate. What I do ask is that you don't take it. If you're a therapist, I'm talking to you, or if you want to be a coach in this space, totally take the lessons that you learned from this program, but please don't take my materials and like start a business, because that's not cool. And it's happened before. Of course, take all the like lessons learned and ripple them out into your community. Just please don't use like the actual materials. Okay. So that's the pre-recorded stuff that you have. Okay. Now this is the live part. That's 3 months intensive. It is September 4th until November 22nd, I believe. And this is when we have every week a live session with me for at least 2 hours where I go through your submitted questions and either answer your question if you'd like to be anonymous, or you get off mute with yourself or with a partner and I spot coach you through the material, right? So you have your question that you've submitted and we're going to apply it to your home life together. So it's a back and forth, right? This can be very vulnerable. It's also very transformative for parents on the call because they're hearing the stories, as Donna mentioned earlier, of other families and realizing that this is not just them, right? And I'm going to be selecting questions based on 3 things. Relevancy to the module that we're on. Second, has the parent been spot coached already? And third, first come, first serve. Okay. So the program is large. Last time we had over 200 families. However, I'm generally able to get, if you submit a question before module 9 or 10, I will find a way to answer your question. Okay. At least once. If you submit it on the night before the 12th module, I can't guarantee it. Like that's the part of like you have to do your half of actually participating and submitting questions based on what we're learning. Okay. Also, if I don't get to your question, it can always be dropped into the online community. And then one of our coaches or me will help you break down the next right step using the tools we're working on. Okay. So hopefully you're starting to get the picture of like we're actually practicing these materials together. Then we're going to have some live bonus sessions with specialists. So we're going to have a nervous system healer who was my nervous system healer and also has a PDA child. She's brilliant, and she teaches us polyvagal informed tools to support our nervous systems as we go through the program. And then she does a session on havening, which is a modality that supports the nervous system in a very simple way that you can do 2 to 3 minutes a day. Okay. We're going to have a teen session. We're going to have two adult autistic PDAers. We'll have three dad sessions or non-lead parents. And then we'll have upcoming sessions that if they're not during your cohort, you will be able to access as an alum. So for example, the ones we have coming up are unschooling, like techniques for unschooling in PDA. We have a session with a clinical psychologist on being a couple, surviving as a couple with a PDA child or teen. We have hopefully one on sleep. We have one on responsive feeding with a medical doctor who's an expert in trauma-informed feeding. And those are going to be, you will have continued access to those as an alumni as well. Then we're beta testing a moderated alumni community, which right now has like, I think 1,200 families in there, where you guys can connect across cohorts once you're done with the program. Okay. So those are like, oh, and you get all the pre-recorded materials that we have on offer. And if I do another workshop, like while you're in the cohort or afterwards, you'll get that for free. So again, it's supposed to like be like, this is all you need. Comprehensive package. Okay, I'm going to pause again. Is this making sense? The details. It's a lot of details, but there's a lot of things. Okay, now I want to talk to you about the methodology. And then we're going to be almost done and go into the Q&A. Okay, so the methodology is based on all the work that we've done with parents over the years and the one-to-one coaching I've done and the patterns I've observed. So it's called the 5A framework. Module 1 is awareness. Module 2 is acceptance. Module 3 is accommodations. Module 4 is affirmation, and Module 5 is advocacy. And then within each of those modules, we have skills that we're working on. Okay, so let's talk about Module 1. So we'll be doing Module 1 for 2 weeks. So that the two skills you'll be working on are the PDA lens, which is something you can take on and off, but for the purposes of our program, we're going to put it on for 3 months together. It'll fall off, and then I'll be like, put your PDA lens back on. Falls off for me too, no big deal. And then we'll also be practicing the sacred pause, taking a sacred pause before we act so that we have more agency within our constraints. So why is it important to continually practice putting on the PDA lens? So for most of our children, they have a lot of behaviors that can be explained by a lot of different things, right? Like if you just take demand avoidance or dysregulation, like that could be ADHD, it could be anxiety, it could be ODD, it could be trauma, it could be autism without PDA, right? So there's lots of different things that could be causing the same behaviors. At the same time, many of our children will have co-occurring conditions, whether it's PDA and ADHD or PDA and anxiety, generalized anxiety, or sometimes PDA, OCD, or medical issues like PDA, PANS-PANDAS, PDA, Down syndrome. Okay. So we're going to be isolating the PDA variable. We're going to be focusing on that lens. So let me give you a story to illustrate why this is meaningful. So I remember a mom sharing in the moderated community 2 cohorts ago, this aha moment that she had at the very end of the program, even though it was an awareness aha moment. And she shared with us this story about how her son, he just wouldn't put shoes on. He wouldn't put socks and shoes on. Whenever they were leaving the house, he would kick and scream and resist. And, she would try and buy him like these special socks and support him with these like laminated charts and all the things. And so she was really nervous to take him skiing on a family vacation because of the boots. Like they were clunky and uncomfortable, even if you don't have sensory issues. So she came back from this vacation and he had had no problem with the boots. Like put them on, no resistance, went skiing, it was all good. And she was stunned, but she had this aha moment that she had been working only through the sensory lens to understand her child's behavior. And so through the sensory lens, it would be a paradox for this child to be fine with the boots. But she went back to the awareness piece, which is the root cause of the PDA avoidance and dysregulation and activation is the perception of a loss of autonomy, freedom and choice, and or equality, right? So the child didn't perceive autonomy around the shoes or where he was going because he was going to school or going grocery shopping or going to a social event he didn't want to go to. So he was screaming when he was putting on the shoes. But when he was going skiing, he wanted to be doing it and he was engaging in novelty, dopamine, and excitement, which was regulating his nervous system. So he put on the boots. There was no demand avoidance. Okay. So this may seem like a simple story, but for many of us, myself included, we might be working through a sensory lens with a sensory processing disorder diagnosis and an occupational therapist for years, not understanding that, like, actually what's causing this might not be sensory, right? And the same can be true for like children with an autism diagnosis where there's this doubling down on like, oh, they need social skills and they need social communication skills, and we'll put them in a social group and they need to learn these behaviors to be social based on this assumption that the disability or difference is a lack of social communication abilities, right? Whereas, like, for many of these clients that I've worked with, pushing them through these things is pushing them further into the survival brain where none of us can access empathy, can connect with others, can communicate coherently, right? When we're in that part of the brain, none of us have social communication skills. So then through the PDA lens, the task becomes, instead of teaching them, like, quick, get the skills, it becomes, let's support them to get out of their survival brain back into the frontal lobe where they can access the skills that they may already have and or learn them quickly because they're actually in the right part of their brain. Okay, so with autism, the shift might be, often it's like social communication, sensory, and then other things down here like executive functioning, but we're flipping it of like, what if we see everything through the autonomy and equality lens and the nervous system lens, and then that is moderating and affecting the sensory and the social communication. Then we can start to really see things differently and start to problem solve and work with therapists in a different way. Same thing with executive functioning and ADHD diagnoses, right? So often PDA and ADHD are co-occurring, but a lot of times some of the symptoms or behaviors like constant motion, inability to engage or focus, like whirling dervish hyperactivity, which was definitely and sometimes still is my son, as we work consistently through this lens, methodically as parents, and we start to accommodate and change what we're doing, we may see that come down because it was fight flight and not ADHD. And then we realized, oh, a lot of this has nothing to do with ADHD. It has everything to do with the neuroception around threat. And do I have freedom and choice? And do I have a perception that I'm equal to or above who's around me? Okay, this is what I call an empirical question, which means we don't know. We don't know until we try something different and we collect data along the way. But this is what gives parents confidence because then they know, like, this is sensory, this is PDA. This is how I deal with the sensory. This is how I deal with the autonomy, right? Because sometimes they can go against each other. All right, is this making sense so far? Ursula says yes. Amy says yes. Linda says yes. She's from Nashville. Awesome. Okay. Then we move on to the second module, which is acceptance, the second A of our 5A framework. And the skill that we're going to be working on, I'm going to illustrate here. I'm going to teach it very briefly here as an illustration, is called cost-benefit decision making. Okay. And this, I believe, is one of the most important skills that supports parents to get unstuck. So if you have questions about violence, boundaries, schools, screens, or siblings, this is where we're going to be starting, okay? We're going to be coming back to the cost benefit first before we develop our strategies, okay? So this tool, again, like I said, is not going to be like a traditional economic cost benefit of like, this is the right answer, and so we're choosing this. So if you're an economist out there, that's not what it is. Because often we're going to be using this tool to see like, both options look pretty crappy to me. I'm not sure, but I'm going to choose one of two crappy options. So here's the key logic to this tool, and this is a constraint that all of us on this call share. This is the one constraint we all share, which is if our child or teen is PDA, then we're always making a choice as parents. We're either activating or accommodating their nervous system. There isn't a gray space in between, a yellow zone. It's just those two things. Okay, so based on that logic, we can start to make decisions that can move us out of stuckness. Okay, once we radically accept that constraint, then there's a couple things we can do to use this tool. So I'm going to illustrate how this tool led two families to different decisions around school. Are you guys feeling it? Okay, so first, what we always want to do is put down our constraints. Okay, so constraints are anything that you can't change in the current moment, right? So like if it's raining outside, that's a constraint. But a constraint might be bigger picture. And it doesn't mean we can never change them. It just means in the present, when we're making decisions, like when our PDA child is like swearing at us, like in that moment, we can't change some of the structure of our lives, right? So all the types of constraints, and feel free to write this down as we're talking. You might be a single parent. You might have a partner who doesn't believe in PDA. You might have multiple children like Kendall. You might have 4, right? You might have childhood trauma. And so you're having a trauma response while you're implementing the accommodations. You might have very tight finances. Your child might have a medical issue, right? So the cost benefit of a boundary around medicine is very different than the cost benefit around like whether or not I think they, drink their chocolate milk to get protein, right? Like there's levels of the costs. And this is what we're going to start to get into. Your child might be from a marginalized identity, right? So like, for example, in a previous cohort, when we're doing this cost benefit, we recognize like if you have a Black child, the cost of non-compliance outside of the home is higher for that child because they're at risk, right? We're not going to judge it. We're not going to argue with it. We're just going to name it and we're going to recognize it without judging ourselves, right? And we're going to accept it of like, okay, this is how it is. It might suck, but this is how it is. Okay. Then we have our constraints. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a question. We're going to take a particular question and we're going to use the logic of cost benefit decision making and 2 scenarios. Sometimes there's more than 2 scenarios, but usually there's just 2. Based on the activating or accommodating, and we're going to answer our own questions. Of course, throughout the program, we're going to be supporting you every step of the way. I'm not going to like sit there on a call and be like, so outline all of your constraints and I'm going to like support you through it. So let's take 2 families, 2 questions about school, different outcomes. First family, And we're going to put the constraints aside for these families because it will get too long if we're doing that. But please keep in mind, like, I have gone through, I would say, like 100 different cost benefit scenarios with parents, and you can listen in on them using this tool. So like the podcast, even if you're not spot coach during this module, like we're practicing it in the moderated community, you're listening to it in the program, you're listening to the private podcast, so you'll get practice. Okay, question. Should I make my daughter go to another school? She's 13. She isn't learning anything in this current school. She's just, she seems to be just like joking around, not paying attention, doesn't do her homework. And I feel that making her go to another school or homeschooling would allow her to learn more. Okay. So as we probed a little bit of background, the daughter did not want to go to a different school, but the mom really wanted her to. So what do we do? I don't have the answer. She has the answer. So what do? We first go through the scenario of, okay, let's keep the 13-year-old in the current school. What are the costs to the nervous system of this daughter? The cost of going to school, we learned through looking at some of the indicators, was there's some nervous system accumulation during school. When she comes home, there's some activation. She needs to watch a lot of screens to come down. She's not eating at school, and she's eating after school. So she does have some of that like fight, flight, or mobilized energy at school. So there's a cost to her nervous system at this school. Then we probed what the benefits were to her nervous system. And what the mom explained was, well, she has good friends, so she's got that social engagement. Her special interest is other friends and art. So she was engaged in her art classes, and she was fairly accommodated, but she wasn't doing her homework or engaging in much of the learning, right? So we named that, but then I asked the mom, can you do a net cost or benefit? Is it more activating for the kid's nervous system in this present moment, or is it more net benefit to the nervous system? We're doing this through a nervous system lens. And the mom said, okay, probably more benefit than cost to her nervous system. Then we went into the family of like, okay, mom, what's the cost benefit to your nervous system of keeping her in school? Well, the benefit is that the mom could work, she could be in school, she doesn't have to, rearrange her whole finances in life. However, the cost that the mom identified was what I call a fear cost, which is not a true cost. The fear cost was if she doesn't change school, she's never going to learn and she's never going to be successful. So we recognized that valid fear cost, but it doesn't take part of our cost benefit decision making because it's based on fear of the future. And this tool is to help us stay radically present with what we know right now. So then we compared it to the other scenario. Okay, what if you make your child go to another school that you believe would be more, would facilitate more of her learning? The cost to the child would be a trust cost and a nervous system activation from making her do something that she doesn't want to do, because that's the root cause of PDA activation, and it would impact the trust. The benefit is that potentially she would have more engagement in school. We don't know that. But there's also the cost of losing her friends, which is a special interest. Okay. Then we looked at the mom's cost benefit, and the mom had the real cost of finances, the real cost of, not necessarily being able to work while her daughter was at school. The perceived benefit was like more control over the future, but again, that wasn't a real benefit. Okay. So I did not say anything about which she would do. I clarified with her in the spot coaching, okay, like, what do you think for the cost? What do you think for the benefit? Now for you, what about this? And then the mom on the call with her partner, made the decision. And you don't have to make the decision on the call. It's a seed that's planted. But what's important is the mom wasn't seeing it clearly, right? It just was like a lot of emotion, a lot of fear, a lot of chaos that all of us feel. And so this tool can help us gain clarity. It doesn't give us the answer, it gives us clarity to make the decision. So that mom made the decision to keep her daughter in school, in the public school where she was. Now we go to another situation where the child was moving towards burnout. And the question was, well, it wasn't really a question. It was, my child is moving into burnout and he's having violent episodes at school, but we can't pull him out of school. Okay. And that, I might probe you and say, okay, let's probe on I can't pull him out of school. Like, what are your constraints? Are they financial? Are they job related? Let's accept them, make them clear. But in this case, we first looked at the cost benefit for the child's nervous system. So I was like, what's the cost of the child's nervous system at this public school? He was masking a lot of the time, but then he was having huge panic attacks and needing to be restrained and needing to be sent home. And then when he would come home, there was incredibly intense equalizing behavior, like aggressive, controlling, critical, sometimes violent behavior towards the mom and the sibling. He was staying up later and later, he was self-harming, and he had negative self-talk. That is an outcome of the cumulative nervous system activation from school. Then we talked about the real benefit, not the I wish benefit of him staying in school, but the real benefit, right? Because at first it was, well, how's he going to learn? And I said, well, is he learning if he's in this part of the brain? She said, no, it's not a real benefit. Okay, is there a benefit to his nervous system? No, he wasn't engaging in anything. He didn't have friends there, etc. But then we got to look at the family system. Okay, what's the impact on the sibling of him staying in school? The impact on the sibling of him staying in school, there was a benefit because then the sibling wouldn't feel there was unfairness if the PDA got to stay home. But the cost to the nervous system and well-being of the sibling was very high when we outlined it because the school decision was directly related to the equalizing against the sibling. Okay, and then we asked about the mom, right? So we're including this whole family system. Mom, what's the cost benefit of your child staying in school? The mom wanted the benefit to be, she could work, but then she realized, well, actually, I'm not really working because I'm so hypervigilant. I'm waiting for the phone calls to go pick him up and the judgment from the school that actually it's a big cost to my nervous system, even if there's some benefit of being able to work sometimes. So we just looked at that and then we compared it to the other option, which is, taking him out of school temporarily, unschooling. So the cost to his nervous system may be that there's a small cost, he doesn't get to make the decision, but the benefit might be quite high because he's not constantly experiencing that threat. That's what the mom said. Then we looked at the sibling. There's a cost to the sibling because there's the unfairness of having to go to school, but over time and even directly when the child stopped going to school, there was a benefit to the nervous system of the sibling because the equalizing and violent behavior started to come down. And then we looked at the mom, and there was a cost to the mom's nervous system because the PDA kid would be home and equalizing against her. And there was a cost to her sanity and identity because she would have to stop a large part of her work. And so what you'll see here is that both of these options are pretty shitty, right? Like neither of these feels good. But where the acceptance comes is realizing that there are only these two options when we lay it out using this tool, and that there isn't something that you're missing, and that there isn't some guru or expert out there who has some fix or solution or accommodation that will make this not how it is right now. And then we make the best decision we can, or sometimes there isn't much of a decision to make, and then we radically accept that and know that it's not our fault, right? It's actually the nature of raising a child with a nervous system disability. And I know that this feels heavy, and these 3 weeks are when things get grievy and when parents feel the grief and it comes up and the resentment and the rage, and it should, because it's moving through you, because you're finally no longer denying the truth of what you can't control. But in that letting go, you actually will find more agency and freedom, paradoxically. And that is what I've seen time and time and time again with families, is that when they finally start to radically accept and let go of what they cannot control, things start to shift energetically in the home. They shift for the parent, and by default start to shift with the child, because you're no longer trying to control things that you can't control. And what sets off the PDA nervous system is when we're trying to control, right? When we're not giving autonomy, when we're putting ourselves above them as the decider, right? And that's different than like, I'm an anxious person, therefore I'm causing my kids anxiety. That's not what I'm saying at all. I don't believe that. I believe there's a specific mechanism, which is like when deep down, even if it's subconscious, we're trying to fix, solve, or control our PDAer, they will neurocept that. And we can only make so much progress in terms of transforming things if we're still in that mode. And many of us are, and it's like peeling back onion layers. And I still go through it, but it's deepening and refining. Okay. Module 3. This is when we get into accommodations, okay? So what skills are we going to learn in Module 3? We're going to learn how to measure and track indicators of progress, which is a little bit from my social science past life, but I'm going to make it simple on those 3 dimensions: nervous system activation, basic needs, and connection and engagement, so we can continually make good decisions. Then we're going to talk about 9 preventative accommodations, which just means like we're doing them all the time rather than in response to a big behavior. We're going to talk about autonomy, equality, lowering demands, humor, play, strewing, communication accommodations, of which declarative language is 1, nervous system safety through nonverbal signals and polyvagal theory, and then novelty, dopamine, and sensory seeking accommodations. Then in terms of like responsive accommodations, so like what happens when our child is swearing at us, or what do we do when there's a meltdown, or what happens if there's violence? Once we've done the cost-benefit decision-making, we have 3 types of accommodations: diffusion, de-escalation, and risk mitigation. Okay, so that is a lot that we're going to pack into Module 3. We're going to practice this stuff. We're going to apply it into our own home. We're going to learn how to track indicators, which will help you to communicate objectively with doctors, pediatricians, your partner, but also to trust yourself, so that it's going to be confirming your intuition, right? Module 4 is called affirmation. So this is, we're going to be building on the accommodation skills, and we're going to be taking a different approach to build healthy self-concept and identity in our PDAers. So I'm just going to say clearly that often the first 3 modules are like a lot. So sometimes like we put affirmation on the back burner, or like learn some of the skills, but when you actually practice it, well, maybe after the program, and that's okay. We're going to take a very different approach to identity and self-concept, and we're going to separate out diagnoses and the medical model, identity, and the nervous system. Okay? Because the nervous system and the responses of it are not who you or your child are. They are not their fight flight. So we can allow for them to have a negative or complex relationship with what their body does and the behavioral expression of their disability, and we can support them to name the nervous system, which I walk you through a process where you have a common language in the family that's non-judgmental. My son's nervous system reaction is named venom. um, then there's a separate process that I'll walk you through for identity, which is going to be what they choose. It's not like, hey, you're PDA, right? Which is often how these children are presented with diagnoses and things, or even talking about emotions, zones of regulation, or things that they probably have rejected in the past. So, just from my experience, many PDA children and teens will come to PDA as an identity that they feel a sense of belonging and affirmation with. Others will stick with ADHD or autism. Others will choose no neurotype identity, and that is fine too. Because remember, the name of the game is autonomy and allowing your child to lead you towards what they want as part of their identity. So, I'll just take a pause and ask you guys to raise hands for how many of your kids or teens have rejected talking about emotions, naming emotions, zones of regulation, or previous diagnoses that they've received. Because mine was like, no, thank you. Okay, so I see some hands. Yeah, and also I want to say, like, sometimes a parent goes through this program and they're like, wait, but like, my child or teen already has a really positive identity with autism. And the answer is like, awesome, skip the module. Like, you don't need it. Because the point is like healthy self-concept. And so if your child or teen already has that, don't feel like you did it wrong. This is just sort of an undoing of some of the ways we approach these kids through a more traditional or behavioral approach to identity, and they may have rejected it. Okay, then finally, Module 5 is advocacy. And this is really a different kind of advocacy because we're going to be focused more on what we do rather than focused on what others do. And that's very much the spirit of the program. So you're going to be flipping the script from what you can control and focusing on that. So we're going to continue with the cost benefit decision making. We're going to learn a technique in nonviolent communication. And there's some example scripts for making nonviolent requests. We'll talk about boundaries and pruning, and obviously apply these to your particular situation, whether it's an in-law, a teacher, a partner, whatever it is. So finally, I just want to tell one last story about my family to illustrate how I still use all of these tools and skills. So we've been in the game now for like over 6 years of, parenting differently and trying to figure out how to support our son. And so he's out of burnout, he's thriving, he's still absolutely PDA and has nervous system activation and neuroception around autonomy and equality. But he and we know how to manage it better. But there's still times when we're like, what are we doing? Like, are we making the wrong decision? Should we push more? Should we lower more demands? Especially when there's things that he wants to do. For example, a year ago, he wanted to join tackle football. If he was a neurotypical kid and we hadn't gone through this, I would have just been a blanket no, right? You're too young, you're too small, concussions, etc. But I now think differently, and so does my husband, about like, okay, what does football provide? It's his special interest. It provides intense sensory input, which he needs. It provides novelty and dopamine. How can we scaffold this with accommodations? The 12 things I just mentioned, plus the 4 things that regulate a PDA's nervous system: another safe nervous system, special interests, screens, and or sensory intense experiences. So my husband volunteered to be the coach, one of them, assistant coach. But often, I would say 2 out of 4 practices a week, my son would have an enormous panic attack, and my husband would have to carry him off the field, kicking, spitting, screaming, crying, right? This is incredibly difficult for parents and for him, and he would miss much of the practice. So we leaned on the skills of affirmation, the ability to talk about it through the lens of PDA and the nervous system. My husband leveraged the advocacy tools for how to communicate this to the other coaches, but then we had to use the decision making, right? There were moments in the season where we're like, are we doing the right thing? Should we make him stop? Should we lower the demand, even though he loves it and he wants to? And so one of the ways we felt semi-confident in the uncertainty was going also back to the tracking indicators of like, okay, how are his basic needs? Is he eating less or more? He's eating more. Okay, awesome. How is his sleeping? Is he staying up like he used to and not being able to sleep? Or is he sleeping okay? He's sleeping okay. Is he equalizing more or less against his brother, William? He's actually equalizing less. And his self-concept and his connection is good. And he's not having more meltdowns. So even though within those practices that were exquisitely uncomfortable, especially for my husband, the overall picture we were able to make sense of, even if there was messiness and discomfort. And on Monday, my son will start his next season of tackle football. We're both really nervous about it, but we know that we have the tools to make the decisions to the best of our ability within the constraints that our family faces. And that's what I hope for all of you. Okay, so that is the program. And I have a bunch of questions from families that I'm happy to answer. But I'm just going to take a deep breath. And if you guys need to drop off, no worries. I'm happy you're here. Just looking at who's here. All right. I see less faces. I see Christy. I see Marites, Linda, Amy, Kendall, Paul. Hello, Paul. Ursula, Aveen, Debbie, Jay, Sophia, Janae. I hope I said your name right. Kelly, Jason, Adam. Adam has 2 dogs. And hello, cute doggies. All right. So these are, I got a total of 75 questions. There may have been more coming in after lunch. I picked the first 48 to answer. I'm going to do, I left the more complex questions for the end. So I'm going to start with the easy logistics questions. And I'm just going to get through, either my batteries will run out or everyone will get off the call. But either way, I'm going to do my best to get through as many as possible. And I'm just going to say your first name so that you know it's you that asked the question. I hope that's okay. Okay. Kate, how often do you offer the program in case the timing on this one isn't the right fit? So we offer the program 3 times a year. So the next cohort enrollment period will be mid-December for a January 2025 cohort. And then the next cohort after that will be a spring launch for a summer cohort. So it's about every 4 months, depending, but more or less, well, yeah, 4 or 5 months. Okay. Nell or Nellie, is it doable to follow the program from overseas, Europe? So as I mentioned in the logistics part, there's a lot of it that's asynchronous. The moderated community is open 7 days a week and people respond at all hours. The live calls usually last between 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. on Wednesdays, which for like the UK is going to be like 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., We do have a lot of UK participants. We have people from Ireland, Scotland, Germany, Finland, um, Norway. But for some people that's a good time because it's like right after their kids go to bed. Some people it's not. You can still submit questions even if you can't be live with me, and I can still answer them. We just won't have the back and forth. Um, but yeah, if that feels doable to you, then yes, it's doable, but that's totally your decision. Um, and then the guest expert sessions are usually at different times during the week. So those we haven't scheduled every single one yet. Okay, specifics of the program. Amarina. Have you offered identity-specific or affinity group chats between participants? For example, our son, who is likely PDA, is also adopted. It could be very valuable for adoptive parents to discuss the overlaps between adoption and relinquishment trauma and PDA. So yes, so usually we start with like, here are the 5 modules, and then like this is the accommodations module circle. And then we always start with like Australia, UK and Europe, teens and tweens. And then we sort of like see what people ask for. So in the last session, we had parents of trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming PDAers, and we did have an adoption one. And those continue into the alumni. We also have a non-lead parents section. So I try and let it emerge organically because I don't know how many families like have adopted kids, but I think we've had enough requests for that we'll probably just start with all those groups that I've mentioned. But if parents have like a complex, Pans Pandas group or something like that, they can always email us and we'll set it up. Okay, Carolyn, do you go through the pre-recorded videos and materials during the program, or is there the expectation that they should be watched prior to the live program, or are they totally separate? So they're separate in the sense that you go through them on your own time, and it will help you to formulate questions. Like if you want me to spot coach you, it will help you to watch the relevant modules beforehand, but it's usually only like an hour and a half of materials that you have to watch beforehand, and you can start as soon as you purchase the program. So, but I never want parents to feel stressed, so it's not a prerequisite. It will just help you formulate your question. Okay, Sarah, how much of the content will apply to older teens? So as I mentioned in this call, the majority of what I teach you is skills, right? And tools, and we're going to apply them to your home. I do in the pre-recorded materials give examples for both children and teens. Donna will be in charge of the teen moderation and connecting families of PDA teens. There's also a ton of private podcast episodes about or with families who have teens, so you'll be able to hear examples from other families. And I think like what we're doing in the program is trying to support you to apply these tools and frameworks to your specific case. So Donna is really our expert for that in terms of someone who's already lived through it with her girls. But both Kendall and I have also coached families with teens, so we can support the application of the tools as well. Is the group mostly parents of little ones or an even mix? I would say every cohort is different, but it is skewed towards younger children, meaning 11 and under. I would say about 20 to 30% are parents of tweens and teens, so like 12 to 18. And then we'll always have a small subset of parents of young adults. So like 3 to 5 families, or there may be more because not everyone is like super active. So I don't always know exactly, but those are the patterns. How much privacy for group members who ask questions? Okay, so it helps us help you more if we know who you are, right? So like if I can put a face to the name between you on the spot coaching and you in the moderated community and you in the inbox if you have a challenge, like that helps us. But if you want, you can set up your community name, like in the moderated community, as anonymous. And people do submit questions anonymously. So I'll see your email address and I can figure out who you are, but you can submit it anonymously and I will answer it anonymously. And then for the spot coaching, we just ask that you don't use your child's name. If you do, we will cut it out and anonymize for the podcast, but it will be available to the cohort. Well, the recording with your face will be available to your cohort, and then the anonymized audio for the podcast will be available to the alumni. Will we need to reveal last names or faces? You never have to reveal your last name or your face. Like you don't have to put your face or real name on these calls, for example. Like that's totally up to you. The moderated community is meant to facilitate like real connections between families. So sometimes it's harder to do if you don't have a real name. But again, like autonomy, there aren't a lot of rules for how you do the program. You have autonomy for how you do it. Okay, payment. Natasha, I will be at work at the time of the live call, so we'll need to watch the video later. If we decide to sign up, will we get another link to sign up? Yes, you will get another link. Does FSA reimburse under category of therapy parenting strategies? So family savings account. My husband will see if work reimburses since this is part of our son's health care and was recommended by the pediatrician. So we've never had a family get FSA reimbursement that I know of, but we have had a family who successfully used HSA, which is health savings account. And we're happy to provide any invoices, receipts that you need, the curriculum of the program in order to get coverage or support getting reimbursed. That would go through my husband and the Journey at Peace Parents account, because we do have an admin and customer service gal named Helen who can support you. Okay, couples. Alex L. How can this program benefit couples? I'm on board with the approach, but I'm curious if part of the program is focused on couples and how they can bond and address different perspectives and paradigms within the context of treating PDA. Okay, and I have another question that's similar to this. I have a couple. Julia, will this program help parents get on the same page? Yeah, when it comes to home structure. Okay, so we can never guarantee that parents are going to be on the same page by the end of this program because like we can't control that type of thing. But here's what we do in order to facilitate that to the best of our ability. So each parent is provided with their own access to the program so they can go at their own pace. Okay, because it is very common, in fact, almost always the case that parents will be on two different journeys that are parallel and at different paces. We will have the 3 live sessions with Jake, which are focused on dads or non-lead parents. We're just going to call it non-lead parents, meaning the person who is not doing the bulk of the caregiving and parenting, because they're the ones who are often the most resistant. We will also have a session with a clinical psychologist to talk about why it's difficult for parents to get on the same page, and we will work in the advocacy module about how to communicate your needs rather than focusing on trying to convince someone else about PDA, including your partner or spouse. Many families find that this provides a common foundation language and facilitates getting on the same page. Some families do not, because some parents are resistant, I'm not going to be taking, I see a bunch of hands up. I'm not going to be taking those questions at this stage because I'm prioritizing the questions that were submitted ahead of time. But we can't, some parents are going to have undiagnosed PDA and be super resistant regardless of what we say and provide. And that's just something that we radically accept and recognize, like, as you're moving through the program with no judgment. But like, the parents who have the hardest time often making the paradigm shift have resistance that's outside of the logic that might come from other areas that we don't have control over. Kelly, are the 12 sessions interactive? They are interactive, but structured, meaning the people who will be coming off mute will be the people I have selected ahead of time and communicated to the whole group. These are the people that have been selected, and here are their questions. So you can read them. And then we send out a reminder an hour before the session with the final order of the participants. And the chat is going during the call. I'm often checking in after after I spot coach, but I'm not tracking it because it's too much action for me to stay focused. But it is a place that parents are supporting the person getting spot coach. They're saying, hey, I feel that way too. They might be connecting with each other. So the chat is usually pretty active. And towards the end of the program, I sometimes do more of a workshop-y vibe because we've learned all the skills and then we're sort of applying them. Are participants on camera during weekly sessions, or do you have it in presentation mode? It is not in presentation mode. It is in regular Zoom mode. I don't know what that's called. Okay. Inclusion criteria, meaning like, who is this for? Paula, does it matter if we don't have any type of diagnosis and we're just going with our mother instinct and recognizing that our child is a PDA? And Molly has a similar question. So you absolutely do not need a diagnosis. Many parents do not have any diagnosis, or they have a partial diagnosis. And even if they are diagnosed, it will likely be ASD with a demand avoidant profile. Okay, so again, we're not working through the medical model. We're not clinicians or therapists. We're working through like decision-making, caregiving, parenting. And so all that matters is if you believe that this would be beneficial to you, and you are more than welcome to be here. Okay, now we have a bunch of questions about the age of the child. So we have Jamie, Beth, Brian, and Natalie. I initially put us on the wait list for my 15-year-old son, but now we're fairly certain that our 14-year-old son is also PDA. Can we take the paradigm shift program and focus on both children? Yes. Yes, but your cost benefits will be more constrained because you have 2 PDA children, so you have those constraints. That doesn't mean the tools won't apply to both of them, because they will. Beth, does this program help young adults as well? My son is almost 18. Yes, caveat. Okay, so the tools apply to any age, including you can use them on yourself or with others who are not your children. However, a couple things to keep in mind. Part of what's healing about this program is the large group that you're in and finding people who are going through the exact same thing as you. If they're 18 or older, you're gonna be having a smaller group, right? You're not going to have 100 families who are going through exactly the same thing. You're going to have 5 or 3. Second, the constraints are different and they're higher. And I don't talk a lot about like a child who's living outside of the home, or who is in college, or who has moved home, because it's different decision making and it's a different responsibility and relationship when you have an adult child with a nervous system disability. And just to be frank, like, the progress will take longer the older your child is. That being said, in the previous 2 cohorts, we've gotten I mean, we had feedback from a mom whose child was 31, and she said, like, things had transformed for the better. Um, but you're gonna need to apply it a little bit more to your situation than me doing it in the curriculum. Because, like, the pre-recorded content is not speaking to above 18. In some of the private podcasts, you will hear a couple spot coaching sessions of me with a parent of an adult, but it's not going to be the bulk. Okay, so Brian, same question. So would it be beneficial for him to view the videos or attend the class if he's willing? Our son is 20. So normally how we manage this is, like, the reason we have a limited number of spots and there is a live cohort is because we have real people using their real energy and their real time to support you. And so we do limit the amount of people who can ask questions. So only parents who purchase the program and not like grandparents and therapists and who are in the community. And we're focused on the parent perspective, which can be triggering to an adult child, right? So what I would say is he is absolutely welcome to view the pre-recorded videos. I think they could be very helpful. He might love coming to the nervous system sessions where we're working on our nervous system, but just discerning if it's going to be like too triggering for him, because it really is from the perspective of the parent and what we're experiencing. And so that would be something you would just like figure out before pushing him or encouraging him to do that. So another question from a mom of a 28-year-old. Yeah. So again, I know that you're completely exhausted and it's so hard. And I know you've been through so much. But I really want you to think carefully about, like, I don't want a parent to buy the program thinking it's going to be tailored to parents of 28-year-olds, because it's really tailored to parents of 3 to 17-year-olds. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Questions about burnout. We have Amanda, Nina, JC, Rena. Okay. So we have both the question of, is this the right thing if my child is in burnout? And is it only focused on burnout? Or what if my child's out of burnout? What if my son is no longer in burnout? Is this still applicable? And then the last question is, my child, I believe, is in burnout, home from school, recovering her nervous system on the couch, YouTube, iPad, Minecraft, lower demands, etc. Is now a good time for us to do the paradigm shift? Okay. So many of the families that will be in this program will have children in burnout, and many won't. Many will have like studied PDA and like be super engrossed in it and like know a ton about it and have been implementing for a year and are coming in to deepen and refine. So my perspective is that the skills and tools and the sense of belonging and healing that you will get from this program are going to deepen your experience and be applicable whether or not your child has ever experienced burnout, is in burnout currently, or is out of burnout. What I do want you to be cognizant of is whether or not you're in a crisis right now, because if you're in a crisis where like you truly feel like you can't access any creativity or decision making or stay regulated enough to move through some of your triggers, then it might not be the right time to take this program. Okay. How is this program? The next topic. Should I buy or not? I've put in, how is this different than other programs or your social media? Okay. Crystal, will we get assistance on our personal situation with our child? I figured with so many people in the program, I worried I won't be able to get the help we need. Okay, if you're looking for one-on-one attention, and if you're looking for coaching, this is not the program. Don't buy the program, okay? This program is for people who are going to move through with a group of other families to take skills and practice them, and they're going to be doing a lot of the work to apply it to their specific situation. Of course, we're going to help you, right? On a spot coaching, by pointing you to a particular private podcast that talked about the exact same thing or something analogous, or we're going to help you in the community to discern the next right step using the tool that we're working on. But we cannot take every single family's entire personal existence and coach them through it, because that's not the design of this program. So if you're someone who's listening to this and is like, oh, I thought like it would be more one-on-one with Casey, like, then it's not the program for you. Because while I will be in the community and I will be with you at all the live sessions and I will be with you um, with the guest experts, I don't want you to think that like every single question that pops into your head, I'm going to be able to personally answer. And in fact, that doesn't serve anyone, because what I'm trying to do is to support you to develop the foundational skills so that you can eventually like answer your own questions, right? So I hope that answers your question. Okay, I'm going to skip that one because I don't talk about other people's work in the PDA space. Okay, Anna, what percent is going through the actual tools? Other programs I've done and books I've read spend 85% of the time on the why, but just skip over diving into the how. Okay, so the how is the bulk of this program and why we're focused on taking action and why it might be triggering. The awareness module, we will spend time on the why, and and the coaches will identify why you're getting stuck, which I don't think other programs do or books do, because it's more about the parent journey than even what PDA is. But the how is like, how do we implement these tools? How do we apply them to our own family? Where are we getting stuck? How can we tweak? How can we be creative? So that is the work that we're going to be doing together. Okay. How is this different than your Instagram? Claire and Janae, will the program cover things to try in the midst of a child's panic attack beyond what you've touched on in Instagram posts? So, yes and no. Yes and no. So, like, we're going to be taking tools and skills, and like, if you want to workshop what happens during a panic attack, like, let's say we're in the accommodations module and you've gone through the de-escalation video and you've gone through the risk mitigation video and the examples. A lot of that is going to be somewhat overlapping with what I may have mentioned on Instagram or in my podcast. But what you're going to do is you're going to say, Casey, I'm getting stuck here. And you're going to ask the question about that in the accommodations module. And then I may help you pan out and say, actually, this isn't a question about how to de-escalate. This is a question about cost benefit decision making and acceptance. And we're going to go back there, right? So I have the bird's eye view and I'm going to help you get unstuck. Again, I'm not here with like the magic bullet of like, here's all these things that I don't post on Instagram, and once you buy, I'm going to give them to you. Like, primarily, I share a lot of this freely. I mean, I would say everything. The only thing I don't share is my one-on-one attention and time, which is what you get in the program. And you get structure, and you get community, and you get other coaches live. So that's kind of how it's different. Can the same information in this program be gained through the free podcasts and videos found online? Yeah, it totally can. You can totally just like find much of the same information. It will be a little bit different because in this program, we're applying it to real life situations. So all 240 podcast episodes are me and a parent. Not every single one. Some are just me answering a question, but it's a parent. You can hear their situation, you can hear me, and we're going through workshopping and troubleshooting and decision making with tools in a real life scenario. And you're going to be connecting with families in the community. You're going to be connecting with them in the chat. So like I give away all the information for free to parents, but it's applying it and implementing and practicing it with real nervous systems live that I think makes it different. But, I'm also a very DIY person. So, you might be too. And maybe you're like, well, I'll just study all this stuff on Instagram and do it myself. And that's fine too. Okay. Sam, I'm wondering if the program would touch on the topic of medication at all. I've not heard it mentioned in any of your materials that I've reviewed. Okay, so I don't teach on medication. Here's what I can provide. I can speak anecdotally about patterns, and I can facilitate sharing of parents' information about medication. So, like, for example, you could go into the community, this just happened this week. My doctor prescribed guanfacine for my PDA child. I'm nervous about it. Who has experience with it? Casey, what is your bird's eye view of the parents you've worked with whose children have tried guanfacine? What should I be aware of? And then we can facilitate that sharing of it. But I, of course, am not going to post about medication on Instagram. I'm not a doctor, and it's not ethical for me to like give clinical insights where I can't. But yeah, I mean, basically everything is, as long as you're abiding by the criteria of like non-judgment of others, not emotional dumping, and not soliciting your own business or someone else's business, like you can post free resources. It's just like, you know, don't come in here as a PDA coach trying to drum up business. But besides that, like you can ask whatever you want. And if we can't answer it, we'll tell you. It's pretty, it's pretty open, and it's a private community. So like what I put on Instagram in that sense about my personal life is going to be different. I might share more personal anecdotes in a private community than I do for the whole social media world. Stella, does the program cover how to help yourself regulate, especially for those of us who are recently diagnosed ADHD? I never know how to say that. ADHD, PDA ourselves. So yes and no. So like the pre-recorded materials touch on it. There's a lot of it in the private podcast because a lot of families, a lot of parents are undiagnosed or recently diagnosed. We will be working on nervous system tools, and it is trauma informed in the sense that like there's no evaluation, there's no assessment, there's universal design, and like we do our best to co-regulate and read the energy when we're speaking with parents, but it is also supportive for us to understand, like when we send out the email of like, hey, do you have any time constraints? You've been selected for a question. If you like give us a heads up on your trauma or neurotype, if that's going to be something that can be super triggering for you. But Kendall can definitely be supportive there, and Afshan, our 2 nervous system trainings are really designed to focus on the body and the nervous system of the parent. And those have been sessions that recently diagnosed or undiagnosed PDAers or autistic individuals have found very, very supportive. Meredith, will this course help us build skills to enable older kids to independently manage their PDA? My kid is 5, but my biggest desire is to make sure she will be able to navigate adult life. Okay, so the perspective I have on this is that by us learning these tools and making decisions to accommodate our child's nervous system and support their identity formation and to de-escalate meltdowns, all of these things are helping them get back into their thinking brain, but they're also allowing them to observe how we're managing their nervous system disability, which supports over time their ability to manage their own. right? And in the beginning, when they're in burnout, when you can't have communication with them, they reject you talking to them, like it's not going to be a direct, like there's not going to be a lot of direct teaching. But over time, you can get to a place where there's more collaborative work on like what is happening in their body, how can we problem solve, how can we set up their life so that they can manage their nervous system disability as a young adult and beyond. Does this program go over discipline? I do not teach discipline. This is a non-behavioral program. So I'm teaching parents how to caregive and how to provide accommodations and make decisions based on the logic of the PDA nervous system as a disability. Okay, so discipline, I'm not teaching discipline. I will, however, help you make cost benefit decisions around when you set boundaries. So I'm not entirely sure if you mean like, does this program teach you how to like get rid of certain behaviors, which it does not. This program will support you in making decisions around what your boundaries are and your values and when to set boundaries and then how to de-escalate if there is a nervous system activation. Okay. Kate A, do you provide guidance for how to help PDA children complete chores? Not really. Do you have guidance on how to teach money or set up allowances for PDA children? Not really, no. Do you have guidance on how to handle younger siblings of PDA children, such as if they pick up on behaviors? Yes, we do talk about that quite a bit in the Q&As if it comes up. There's also plenty of podcast episodes from previous cohorts where that has been a topic that comes up. It comes up in the community. It comes up a lot in our spot coaching. But I don't teach like how to get a PDA or to do chores. Often what I'm supporting you with is like deciding, is it worth doing chores based on the nervous system activation that results? And then money and allowances, that's kind of outside of the scope of what I teach. It's just too, like, it doesn't mean you can't ask that question of like how to do allowance through a trauma-informed PDA lens in the community. And like, we can help you find other parents who are interested in that, but it's not going to be what I focus on in the spot coaching or the modules. Okay. Anna, does the 3-month cohort discuss and teach parents how to heal our kids who are both verbally and physically abusive? Yes, so I will teach you how to understand the theory of change, like healing relationships and healing trauma, and how that's different than accommodating a neurotype. And then the physically and verbally abusive is very common. It's equalizing behavior and fight-flight expression. So that's not uncommon. And we will talk about the deep why, the cost benefit decision making around it, accommodations, and then if it logically moves into the other A's, affirmation and advocacy. Will this program cover issues such as overeating, destruction of property, flip of a switch, back and forth emotions, and how to help de-escalate in the moment? Yes. Yes. This one's about a regression. What's the difference between burnout and a regression? That's kind of more like content based, so that's not about the program. Okay, so this person is talking about Asperger's. Terry's asking about Asperger's and pandas. I feel my job is to set limits because he stays up all night and can't function during the day. It takes him 3 hours to get ready to go out and 6 to 8 hours to get sleep. We have mold remediation going on in the house, along with airflow issues. Will your program address these types of issues? Okay, so like the program itself doesn't have anything about pandas or mold remediation or long COVID or anything like that. However, it doesn't mean that that's not relevant to your family. And so part of what we're doing is we're trying to get you clarity on like what's PDA and what's pandas, right? And what I can do is I can give you that PDA lens and experiment with that for 3 months so that you can see clearly what is what. if you want to bring those constraints or nuances to your question, of course, right? Like that's how we would apply whatever tool we're working on. Like this sounds like accommodations and cost benefit. You would give me that context, and then we would apply the tools to your particular family case, which you've described here. So I hope that makes sense, that like in the pre-recorded content and the structure of the program, we don't have anything about like mold or pandas or pans or long COVID, but it doesn't mean it can't come in organically to our conversations or into the community. And there might be an opportunity to connect across families. Like we've had pans, pandas families before. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, how do you talk to the child about being PDA autistic and having PDA? That's Lucy. So that's what I teach in module 4 in the affirmation module. Casey, what is it about the program that helps us parents change our behaviors, especially for those of us with almost adult teens? I've done so much reading and can feel my shift, but my kids are close to adulthood, and I'm kind of thinking, how relevant to one almost 15-year-olds? How can I ensure this is not just more understanding and actually more rapid action? So it really depends on whether or not you feel you can actually use these tools. So like, for example, it's simple, but taking a sacred pause of like actually operationalizing that instead of reacting or trying to teach in the moment or say something in response to your child, just practicing, like, I'm just not going to say anything for 3 seconds. Right. And that, I mean, that's a practice that all of us could practice our entire lives. Right. I still practice trying to extend that sacred pause so I'm non-reactive. But whether or not you feel that like you are going to be met with what we're learning and feel like the community and the group is going to facilitate you to do that, and if you can take the materials with our support and actually implement them, that is the answer to your question, right? Because like it's not meant to be a passive information dump. It's meant to be moving you through a practice of changing. However, like the parent has to meet our program halfway in the sense of like participating and trying the things and moving through the triggers and recognizing what is your task and what is our task and what is your child's task. And that's going to be triggering. So, you know, I can never make decisions for anybody, and I never judge people for their decision. It's just like that's what I can do, but I don't know you, so I don't know if that like feels like something you're ready to do or if it's the right fit. Okay. I would ask if the program covers the subject of incapability of school attendance due to the demands of the environment, as well as afternoon clubs of small groups such as swimming, football, parkour, and summer camps. I include the latter as these are usually more relaxed and free programs, yet the whole follow simple directions or rules seems to be setting where a child simply might not be able to cooperate. Does the program dive into these topics? Yeah, so these are examples of cost benefit decisions about like, is pushing the child or even encouraging them through these things going to be too activating? And we can look at the indicators for your child to track that. But there's not like a section on parkour, right? It's not like a whole modules on parkour. There may be a family that talks about parkour, but yes, it talks about activities and school, but more broadly. Will the program address how to approach the IEP given the PDA is not official diagnosis? Yeah, so we really don't focus on PDA as like the way to communicate. We break things down into needs and scripts for actually having effective accommodation in module 5. Okay, let me just check. Okay, it's 4:20. Now we have 57 people left, and I did see some hands. So if anyone has a burning question that I didn't cover, now is your moment. I've gone through as much as I could. All right, Ursula. Let me see. I'm trying to get you to unmute here.
There. Is that good?
Yep.
Hi. Thank you so much for this informational episode. And my question is, you talk a lot about like violence and external presentation, I guess, of maybe PDA. And I'm wondering if it's broken down at all into internal versus external. Because we have a situation where I think we've created a life that has kept our kid pretty stable, but I wonder about, if we're not experiencing that, if that is a main focus, like the external, violence and swearing. We don't have that, but we have like some of the meltdown and definite anxiety and self harm in meltdown, but it's subtle. So, and subtle around bathing, sleeping, pottying, and food. So there's I fear that if we were to change our life situation, which would free me and my husband up so much, that there may be some of that other stuff. But right now it does that make sense? So for us, it would be the shift for his nervous system, which is definitely always activated, that we keep pretty calm, versus somebody who's in a lot of crisis due to their behavior.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention one of the circles in the moderated community was internalized PDAers. And so let me think. I don't think in terms of the pre-recorded content, it's all externalized.
Okay.
And certainly there's a mix of internalized and externalized, both parents and also their children.
So it benefits both equally, most likely.
Yeah, I mean, it is harder to track indicators with the internalized expression. So we really have to get granular with like what the face and tone and body is doing and really look at those basic needs and learn to look, which sounds like you've done, look through the lens of like a more immobilized nervous system state or a hybrid state like freeze than a fight flight expression, but all of those different nervous system expressions are going to be related to the same root cause. It's just expressing differently. So the logic and tools should apply equally. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't know if I can guarantee it's 50-50 in terms of examples.
Yeah, that's okay.
Private podcast episodes, but there's certainly a large contingent of internalized.
Okay. Yeah. That helps a lot. Thank you.
No problem. Good question. Okay, Debbie. Trying to unmute you. Okay, there you go.
Hello. This sounds like a silly question, but it's really not. I was a teacher in the past, but now, full-time parent. So I know how people view us differently, parent in a meeting versus a teacher in a meeting. So does this course come with any certificate, just because it's super funny when you go, oh, I've been trained in yada, yada, yada. Let me share with you, blah, blah. Do you do any certificate of some sort that I can have at the end?
We can absolutely provide that. We have provided it.
Okay.
So the boundary.
It's very helpful. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, totally. So the boundary we keep in the program is that you have to be a parent to take the program. You can't be a therapist or a teacher without, or a psychologist without a kid, because we don't want the dynamic of voyeurism or like.
Yeah, I'm a parent. I was a teacher before my son was born.
Yeah, no, totally fine. You can just totally email us and we will create a pretty branded completion certificate like we've done before.
I think all the parents get it, caregivers coming in. Oh, let me share with you, I have a certificate for this course I completed that I'd like to share with you how we're, dealing with certain things with Ben now, instead of here's a parent telling you what to do. I find it works better. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's an easy one. That's a super easy one. Okay. Adria?
Okay, I think I've unmuted. Thank you so much for taking my question. And sorry I'm not on camera. I have color right now, so I'm in a dark room. But I'm currently undergoing what my state calls VPA, voluntary placement agreement with my son. But I wholeheartedly believe he's PDA. He was finally diagnosed with autism. We've worked with one of the top places in the country, Kennedy Krieger, and they're like, well, we have nothing else for you. Just he needs to go to residential, and that's that. While I'm going through this process, he's not home. He is still hospitalized. Would it be? I don't want to say a good idea because I don't want you to make my decision for me. But would it be? Would I benefit from doing the program um, during this phase of our life? Because like he still hasn't been placed. It may be a while. He may have to get placed out of state. We're in Maryland, so I don't even know. It's taken for a very long time. He's been in the hospital since April.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know what he needs help, and we have not been able to access the kind of help he needs. I
Yeah.
haven't been able to. I'm a single mom, and I want him home.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So here's what I'm thinking. Like there's a couple pros, whereas like you can actually focus on the program because potentially you aren't like completely in full-time caregiving mode, but correct me if I'm wrong, because you might be going to the hospital a lot. Sorry, am I?
Sorry, I'm going. Now it's hard to unmute. So I go once or twice a week. He's about an hour and 45 minutes away. Still in Maryland, but yeah, I don't work because I was full time caregiving for him. I'm not working right now. I'm kind of in recovery mode, dealing with some of my own personal stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I think so for obviously like I don't know your whole situation. However, I do know that there is a lot you can get out of this program, and one of the things you can get out of the program is the language, logic, and ability to advocate and teach those around you. So one of the things, like we had a woman in the last cohort whose teen was in like a juvenile detention center for 18 months because he was, you know, it was a difficult situation. And she was able to use a lot of the materials in order to advocate, in order to have more of that, like tracking indicators, advocating with the logic. Like, I can't necessarily guarantee that, but like parents who go through this program become the experts, right? And
Okay.
that's why it's
Yeah.
designed that way, is because we have to teach the experts how to support our families. Um,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, I think if your intuition is telling you like this is really like great, but it's not the right moment, then I would follow that. If your intuition is like, I know that I need this right now, I would follow that. Um, whatever we can do to support, like helping you find things in the program that might help communicate, like we're here for that. But of course, we can't guarantee, how people will be receptive to it.
Absolutely. Yes, I understand. Thank you so much. Yeah, just trying to advocate and help the practitioners understand a little bit more will even be worth it. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sorry you're going through that. It sounds really hard. Okay. Meg, I'm just going to make sure that you are unmuted. There you go.
Yeah, thanks
Hi.
for taking my question. And actually kind of piggybacks off of the previous one. I'm coming into this, I only have one child. And I'm really hoping that your program offers specific strategies on how to advocate for my child and for appropriate accommodations for my child, not just to other adults like his doctors or school teachers or his grandparents who aren't convinced, but also to his friends, his peers, the kids he wants to be friends with, but they are very put off and he's very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way that we approach talking to kids is different than advocacy, but I'll tell you exactly what we work on. So we work on focusing on making requests that are specific rather than advocating around PDA as a neurotype, because that often just shuts people down. So we use something called a Plato framework from nonviolent communication, which allows us to specify, you can sort of think of this like a specific need and a specific request based on like a person, location, action, timing, and object. And then we practice with making specific requests. So if we're talking to a teacher, we might go through first the awareness we go through together, and then we go through the cost benefit decision making. And let's say you're like, okay, I'm keeping him in school, I need to advocate. Great. Then we look at the accommodations. What are the accommodations that will meet his needs? And then we make specific requests using that framework. So for example, instead of trying to convince a teacher or an administrator whose ego is wrapped up in the notion that this doesn't exist, right? Because they're threatened by it. They're like, I didn't
Or
learn
the
about,
psychologist who diagnosed him.
yeah, like I didn't learn about this in school, so it can't be a thing, or else I'm
Mhm.
threatened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we pick the need and the specific thing, and we're like, okay, he needs you as the mom, you're like, maybe he needs a reduced day. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of talking about PDA, we're like, I'd like to make a request. I'd like my son to be able to come home from school. So son is person, location is school to home. I'd like someone to notify me, before 12 when he's starting to activate,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to come home for the 3 hours after school timing. And sometimes there's an object, but in this one there isn't. So then we ask the specific request, and then we either get a yes, or a no, but we could maybe reduce hours for 2 hours, or we get a flat out no, which is a data point. And then we have to go back to decision making or boundaries. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different, like, I don't have a magic template that, like, if you use this, it will work, right? Like, just in the community this week, we were sharing, like, parents were sharing their IEPs with each other, and like, I shared a template letter. But often the resistance and where we're getting stuck is not about the information or the words we're using. It's because of the person on the other end's resistance to it. And so we radically accept that, and then we move with that.
So
So
in the case of like grandparents, though, where, your child's just not disciplined.
yeah. So then we make requests, right? Like, I'd like to make a request. Like when we come over, or like when we talk on the phone, I'd like grandpa for the duration of, or my dad for the duration,
Uh-huh.
not to talk about my parenting. Right? So we're making a request about what you need rather than what they believe.
Okay.
Okay? And then
Yeah.
they may say, yes, of course, we won't talk about it. And then they keep talking about it. And then that's when we go to the boundaries. And we think about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
How do we set boundaries? What does that bring up for you? If you have a history of people pleasing, if you're a fawner, why is it so hard? If they continue, like, it might mean we reduce talking to them on the phone, and if there's continued boundary violations, we explore pruning, which just means like removing ourselves from. So it's a flipping of the script from trying to change other people's behavior to focusing on what we can control and ultimately protect our families, which often over time shifts other people's behaviors, but we have to let go of like what we can't control.
So do you think that, I have an only child, and my other area of concern is with his peers and friends, that it might be beneficial to hear what the program has to say about siblings as I'm trying to learn, because I know it's not necessarily advocacy to another 7-year-old, right? But still wanting to give my child the chance to develop friendships instead of one play date and that kid never wants to see him again.
Yeah. So if we were spot coaching, we would look at this from the big picture of like everything is sequential, right? The goal is to get your child. How old is he?
Almost 7.
Okay. The goal is to get new neural pathways back to his thinking brain, to get him out of his survival brain,
Mm-hmm.
develop a window of tolerance so that when a child does a normal child thing, he may activate, but he's not going to tip over into these behaviors that totally mess up the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Which is what we can control, or that's what we can work on.
goal, we have to look at it sequentially of like through the cost benefit lens, maybe the play dates, we just want to put a pause on them, right? If they're too activating for them, or we would work through the cost benefit with your situation, but we would explore it. We would pan out, right?
Yeah.
Think about why is he so activated and not able to access more of that window. And then once we've explored all of that, maybe we would talk about scripts to say to the kid as an explanation, but we're not going to start there because we're always going to be going to like the root and how to think about it.
Instead of, this is the way my kid is, and I'm sorry he stole your toy and broke your tower and hit your.
I mean, you can certainly say like his body's having a hard time right now, but like that's not going to get at your real concern, which is like you want him to have friends.
Yeah, I want him
Right.
to have the chance,
Yeah. And
like
so
a real chance at making
that's
them.
what we're going to work on, not the like, if you say this, then like obviously happy to give scripts, but what I
That's
really,
probably what I'm asking. That's
yeah,
probably what I'm thinking. Like, do you give specific?
like if you like in the community, like, hey, I'm trying to think of something to say to kids, and like one of the coaches can be like, here are some things that I've said or other parents have said. But the bulk of what we're going to be doing in the program is much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how can we in 3 months give you the tools so that your child's not at that point where you have to say the script?
Mm-hmm. Understand.
That's the goal. And I know it's
And
not,
if you can, yeah. Okay.
we will
Thank
make,
you.
yes, it's not always going to be like this. He's still 6. Don't worry.
He's a big 6.
Yeah, I know.
He's a very and he doesn't understand, why I can spend 6 months trying to reach out to the parents to get another thing set up and scheduled, and they're ghosting, and it's happening over and over again. So
I know. Yeah. Well, let's work on getting him out of the survival brain, because that also will be where he will be able to understand more.
yeah, and the thing you mentioned about taking a step back, and sometimes his play dates have gone long, so it could be a simple thing of, let's just make it a 1 hour thing instead of a 3 hour thing.
Lots
So
of
thank you.
there you
Those are, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. So thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem. All right. The last standards. Is there anybody else who has a question before I get off? Kelly.
There we go. Hi, thank you so much. and this is probably something you can't answer right now, but is there like I know we're talking a lot about the action and doing, is there any research about how this happens in children's brains, or if it's something that's like new, like in this, I don't know, I'm just kind of curious. My daughter seems to be kind of going in that direction, but I'm here for my son. So I'm just wondering if there's any indication on kind of how to, if it's a learned behavior, or if it's all biological, or if it's something that I can try to help mitigate before it gets worse for my daughter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is like, I think the piece that is missed often when we're thinking about like, did my kid just become PDA, or did they learn this behavior? And they may have if they're a younger sibling. Like that's totally possible. And I had that question about my son as well, my younger baby. When he was like 3.5, I was like, okay, I think I have 2 PDAs on my hands. I no longer think that, but often what's behind that question is like, did I do something, or did something happen, or did they become PDA? And I tend to look at PDA as a neurotype that is from birth. However, with the logic of the accumulation of the nervous system stress over time, it often doesn't come out as extreme until they reach a certain threshold of nervous system activation. So they can look very typical for a while, especially if they're more internalized. And then you start to see some of the basic needs indicators, connection indicators, and nervous system indicators. And, I think, the question is for your family, like, are these learned behaviors from the older PDA, or is my daughter internalized PDA, and because of the more stress in the system, we're seeing more of it come out? Yeah. And that's the experiment, right? Like if you were to join the program or not, it's like, can you take even just a week or two and experiment consistently through this lens, and like, does it help? Right? If it works for your daughter, that's what matters, right? Like I've experimented with my younger son, and there are certain things that really do and certain things that don't, right? And that's told me more about his neurotype and what like is causing certain behaviors than any diagnosis. It's like, what root cause is causing this distress? Oh, you're on mute again, my friend.
Sorry. I know it's more about like supporting them where they're at now than where it came from. So I appreciate that. I think, yeah. And also not feeling, I think it's a lot of the judgment too from other people. It's like, oh, well, if she has 2 kids, it must be I'm the common denominator kind of thing. So at least it's good to know. I think it sounds like a great program for a lot of reasons. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad you're here. Okay, friends, my battery's running out. It was really nice to meet you guys, and we will send the replay soon. So thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out with me the whole time. I'm gonna remember your faces. And hopefully we'll see some of you inside the Paradigm Shift program at some point. And if not, it was really nice to meet you.